Well, I figure now is as good a time as any to start doing these again. Um, I've got the rice paper divider behind me because I just got finished installing a new desk and redoing my computer and a bunch of other stuff. Um, a lot of updates, but I was recently talking to somebody about the fact that I've kind of been in this mode of a failure to launch to do my podcasting. And the thing is that I think I listen too much to everybody else. Um, I think it made a lot of sense. I think I want too much for every single person I know to watch this and every single person I know to like this. And the honest truth is that's not possible, and that's an unrealistic expectation. I already have a lot of friends that when I post things on Facebook, they tell me that, you know, it's too long. They don't want to sit there and read a whole 3 or 4 paragraphs of information. They just want small blurbs. Nobody's got the attention span for that. Nobody's got time for that. That's okay. For the most part, somebody's going to hear that and they're going to get what they need from that. And if it's not you, that's okay. And it's taken me a while to be okay with that. And I think that's where I really screwed up on my podcasting. I listened to a lot of people tell me that it needed to be in 10 minutes. And 10 minutes for me was very, very difficult to package. To be able to put my story and what I want to do and the way I talk and have it be genuine coming from me who has a tendency to ramble, has a tendency to go on a tangent, has a tendency to go off subject. I don't want it to be scripted. I want it to come naturally. I don't mind if there's little dogs in the background. I just want it to be real. And so I think that's where I messed up. I think I need to do a better job at putting what I want to put out there, and hopefully the right person will get it. So, instead of starting a whole nother video, I would like to recap and discuss my story. I have not put this out there in total because it's a very long story. So feel very free to pause this, to bookmark this, to save this, because I can guarantee you this is at least going to be an hour video. My story is just my medical story alone. Hey! It's quite a long story. It's a lot. It was very traumatic. It lasted, I was in a hospital bed for 9 months out of the year, and there was a lot of fight, and there was a lot of challenges there. And the thing is that most people don't know the entire story because, again, most people don't have the attention span to figure that out. Most people want the Reader's Digest short story version, and unfortunately you're going to miss out a lot on things if that's what you want to do. But also, sometimes missing out on things is the right way to go. I don't want to criticize anybody for saying, hey, you should listen to everything. That's not necessarily true either. The thing is that I guess what I should say is my opinions are my opinions. They're not necessarily the right opinions or the wrong opinions. They're just my opinions. Uh, Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I don't know. So, my story starts in late 2013. Um, I got fired from a job because I probably was wanting to really get fired. Um, I didn't really want to quit, but I also didn't really stand my ground in that job. And I think people just, I don't know whether they just didn't like me or I was just too soft or I don't know what it was. But basically it was a bad mix of a job for me. And I started to feel like the soul of my body was getting sucked out. And so I didn't really care about what time I showed up or what time I left so long as I got the job done. As long as I got what I needed to get done, that's all I cared about. Unfortunately, that's not what upper management really cared about. What they cared about was the little things of me showing up on time. And again, this is my opinions, you know. But the thing is like, I'm an IT guy. I do IT stuff. I'm needed all the damn time. Um, I've never been at a job where I had to be present while certain people were there. Um, I've been on call for months at a time. I've done a bunch of different stuff. Um, but basically, I got fired. And when I got fired, I was under so much stress that I was already sick, but I thought it was the flu. And so basically, I quit, and then I basically stayed home. I got a temporary job at UPS, working with them, and I actually loved it. And I started losing a bunch of weight because, again, I was sick. And essentially, I ended up having to stay home and getting fired from UPS because I couldn't even get into work. I was so sick. And so basically, I should have gone to the doctor a lot sooner, but I didn't. And so essentially, for 3 months, I was sick with what I thought was the flu. And so I never went to the doctor any of that time. However, on January the 9th, 2014, I did go to the emergency room. The unfortunate thing is that I brought somebody with me that was also kind of abusive, and she basically convinced all the staff there that I was a hypochondriac and that I was I was really sensitive and I was dramatic and I was over analyzing, basically just lying about how much pain I was in. I remember telling the nurse there that I remember what I felt like was I was kicked in the nuts, except instead of that pain being localized here, I felt that pain all over my body. And so they gave me like a flu Z-Pack, steroid pack, then they patted me on my butt and sent me on my way. And 5 days later, I ended up blacking out and collapsing home alone. And I don't know why I blacked out. I don't know why I collapsed, but I remember at that time thinking I'm going to die. And essentially, and I know you're thinking this is a lot of random information. All this is very relevant. And I'm going to tell you why here in a minute. Because I was not sick with the flu. That's what I just thought. Turns out that I had very little blood pressure, and that's why I was passing out. Ended up collapsing on my floor, and at that point in time, once I fell on my floor, I couldn't even crawl anywhere. If I tried to get anywhere above all fours, and almost all fours, I was going to black out again and pass out. And so I was really scared, and I was really freaking out. I remember my cell phone being on like a high bar and thinking there's no way I'm going to get to that. And then praying to God that I would be saved, and then remember looking over and my phone was on the floor underneath one of my bar stools, and dialing 911. And at that point in time thinking, this is a really stressful situation and I think I'm going to die. And if I just say something funny, then this will lighten the pressure and lighten the mood and everything will be okay. And so I remember getting on the phone with 911 and I remember going, she was like, what is your emergency? And I was like, I've fallen and I can't get back up. And now that's so stupid hilarious. But at the time, that was not funny because I realized it wasn't funny because literally that was the truth. I had fallen at 33 years old and I could not get back up. And so she stayed on the phone with me until paramedics got there, and which was an ordeal in of itself. And once the paramedics got there, they tried to stand me up again, and I had blacked out again. When I came to, I was in the ambulance, and they had 5 saline bags hooked up to me, and he was like, "Hey man, I just need you to stay awake. Like, just talk to me, just chit chat, whatever you want to talk about. I don't care, but I just need you to talk to me." And I was like, "Hey, they used one of my keys, my Haida keys, to get in the house. It's like, hey, that key needs to go to my neighbor, Fidel. And by the way, Fidel, if you're out there, I always think about you. I hope you're doing well." But I remember him saying okay, and me asking what's wrong. He's like, let's not worry about that right now. We're trying to figure that out, but right now I just need you to have a little conversation with me and continue talking. And so I remember like that, I don't remember exactly what I talked about. I was kind of in and out on the ride from the ambulance. It seemed like it took them forever to get that ambulance going to get into Denton Presbyterian. By the way, I lived in Albury. I had a house built out there in 2003. I lived out in Albury in a house that I had built. It was my first starter house. I was really proud of it. And I was like 8 minutes away from like Denton. And so we drove into Denton Presbyterian, and when I got to Denton Presby, I remember like being on the stretcher and getting in there and seeing white fluorescent lights, getting into Denton Presby. And that's the absolute last thing I remember until I woke up again. And a lot of this stuff is like 9 years ago. But the reason why this takes so long and there's no way to put this in a 10-20 minute video is because this is so traumatic for me that even bringing it up after 9-10 years ago, still all those feelings of being terrified and scared and not knowing what was going to happen in the next 3 seconds come back real quick. And so I didn't even know what was going on at the time. And so let's say you wake up a couple of months later and realize how close to death you were when you had no idea that's how close to death you were. Because I had no idea. I had no idea that instead of the flu, I had mono. I had Epstein-Barr virus, mononucleosis, which is, a lot of people know it as the kissing virus. It is a saliva transmitted virus. You can get it after drinking after somebody, and a lot of people have it and they can carry it and it doesn't affect them whatsoever. A lot of people can get sick on it and it doesn't get them very sick. Very few people, when they get mono, and especially if they're stressed like I was, which is why I gave you the background about the job. I was heavily stressed. And it basically kind of took over. And so I had mononucleosis. And the thing is with mono is it really attacks your immune system, it attacks your spleen. And so my spleen had enlarged, and basically what caused me to black out was my spleen ruptured open at home, and I lost all but a milk carton of blood. And so when I got to the emergency room and they wheeled me in, even though I was partially awake, and I don't remember any of that, I had very little blood left. And so my mom got there, and when my mom got there, she said that three nurses each had blood bags, like one blood bag in each hand. There's three nurses, there's six blood bags, and they were squeezing those blood bags as hard as they could because I literally didn't have enough blood flow to keep myself alive by the time I got to the emergency room because it had all leaked out inside of my body. And that's why I couldn't crawl or walk or stand or do any of that. And so essentially, my body started dying. I had major organ failure. My lungs collapsed. They had to immediately put a trach in me and put me on a ventilator. I ended up being paralyzed. They immediately put me in medically induced coma, and it took them about 20 hours to get enough blood back in my body to even survive a surgery to seal the hole up. So even 20 hours of putting blood in, I barely had enough blood to even survive a surgery. So I spent like 14 days at Denton Presby, and Denton Presby, even at that point in time, said he's got about a 5% chance of living. And there's no way this hospital, we don't have enough stuff to be good for him. He needs to go to Baylor. And so essentially, they called Baylor to get me a bed. And the only way to get me a bed at Baylor is basically and this is my mom's standpoint, because at this point in time, I'm in a medically induced coma for 2 months. And so essentially, they basically put me in a hallway at Baylor in ICU in Roberts for like a week until somebody died, and then I got to go into a pod unit, which a pod unit is like a really extreme ICU where they watch like four patients, and that's it. And you're all like next to each other, you know. And the lady that I was next to, her ex-boyfriend basically shot her in the temple with a handgun, and that was the condition of the people that I was in. And so my mom basically says that when they transferred me to Baylor, she was hoping Baylor had a magic wand to fix me, and Baylor said, we don't have it. And so they took care of me the best they could, and they tried to convince my mom to put me in palliative care, which my mom freaked out about that. And granted, nowadays, palliative care means a whole lot more than just in-hospital hospice, by the way. It means care. It means absolute care. And it's great because they've redone it for cancer patients to make sure that cancer patients are very well cared for. So, you're ever in that situation, you hear palliative care, don't freak out. It's not trying to get you to die in the hospital. It's making sure as a patient you're comfortable, even when you can't cognitively tell them what's comfortable for you. So my mom ends up freaking out, finding a doctor. She basically yells at this doctor and says that they need to fix me. The doctor says, I don't know what I can do, but I'll take a look at it. The doctor she ends up yelling at is the director for intensive medicine at Baylor, Dallas. He is the head director of ICU in Dallas. His name is Adam Mora. Dr. Mora came in, and he basically said, I think he's got Guillain-Barré. I don't think he's paralyzed. Or I don't think he's brain dead, because that was the other thing too that I kind of skipped, because you're going to have to bear with me because there's a lot of things I might skip because it's a lot of fucking details. There's already a lot of shit I've skipped. But essentially, they thought I was brain damaged because after 68 to 100 units of blood they had to give me, the statistical likelihood of my brain having enough blood flow at that time to survive all of that blood loss is, without any damage whatsoever, is pretty statistically unlikely. So they thought I was brain damaged. It turned out I was just paralyzed from a syndrome called GBS, or Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's a fancy French word that basically means your immune system freaked out and ate the receptor sheath of all your muscle mass, so when your body sends electrical signals through your body, the muscles don't get it. So I was paralyzed from the neck down from Guillain-Barré, and so basically Dr. Mora took me up to 4th floor ICU in Truett so that he could monitor me instead of Roberts. At that point, Tommy started trying to bring me out of my coma to see if I was truly brain dead or not. And in the end of March, sometime between the 17th and 23rd, I remember getting up. Now, I was up and around before then in bits and pieces because my friends would come to visit me in Roberts. And during this whole time I'm in a coma, I'm having these hellish nightmares that are very freaky. And I thought about writing a book, and I'm still thinking about writing a book, but I thought about starting it where all it is these sci-fi, fantasy, freaky shit dreams that I was having. And basically tricking everybody into thinking the book was some kind of a fiction novel. When in reality it is the true story of what actually happened. So I won't get into details with that because that's a very strange, weird path that I don't want to sidetrack from. I had some interesting dreams though when I was in my coma. Number one, my mother would appear in my dreams. And at first it was very comforting and reassuring because basically it was me freaking out because the dreams are very scary for me. And basically my mom was like, hey, it's your mother. I love you. I'm right here and everything's going to be okay. And so I remember that very, very, very well. And I appreciate her for that because after a while, they started to sound like canned phrases, and then I realized that I was in a never-ending dream that I was never going to wake up from, and it was very scary. It was very freaky. At one point in time, I think I met my grandma in my dreams. These are very real feeling dreams. Come to find out, I was on a lot of propofol, Dilaudid, and fentanyl to keep me down, which is why I was having all the dreams, but that's what that is. So, I will say, though, that I dreamt my mom. She was there every single day, every single night. She never left my side for 113 days. So all throughout my coma, my mom was always there. And basically, in my coma, every time my mom said, hey, it's Matt, hey, Matt, it's your mom. I love you, I'm right here, and everything's going to be okay. It was actually her sitting by my bed telling me that, hey, it's your mom, I'm right here. I love you, and everything's going to be okay. The other thing I dreamt about was I actually dreamt that I was bilaterally amputated from the knees down, and that my entire family basically disowned me because I was a freak at the time, and I had to deal with that. And all of those are blessings because these are things that actually came to fruition well after my coma. I was not amputated until April. And so I was having these dreams that I was bilaterally amputated at the knee down in January, February, and March. So the thing is that I feel like the either higher power in my body was trying to help me prepare for what was about to come. And we can talk about the family thing later because that's all part of this too. And again, this is my side of the story, and that's it. So, anyway, I woke out of my coma. I couldn't speak. I had a full trach on. I wasn't healthy enough for a speaking valve yet. So when I woke up, I couldn't move my hands, my arms. I was paralyzed from the neck down. I could barely shake my head yes or no. I'd lost 150 pounds within about 2.5 months. You could see my cheekbones and a huge feeding tube, TPN tube, straight up my nose. And I have pictures of all that. But when I woke up, Baylor was there to help, and I got a little sheet. It basically had the alphabet on it. We had to spell every single word that I needed to communicate, one letter at a time. Basically going, is the first letter A, is the first letter B, and so it was yes or no. That's how we had to talk. Yes or no. And so, you have to relearn how to communicate. And we did that for about 2 or 3 weeks until I got a speaking valve. And I think when I got my speaking valve, I think all the nursing staff and everything at Baylor was like, take it out, take it back out. We shut him up. I think some people in real life at the bar, when I used to frequent the bar often, they would think that I talk too much too. And the reason why I wanted to tell my story is all this was very scary. This is just March. I didn't get to go home until the day before Thanksgiving that year. So the thing is that here I am in Ford Truett ICU. I've got what I call blue light specials, if you're an old Kmart fan, which is a code blue, which is basically all hands on deck because somebody's trying to die on them and they need to resuscitate. And I sat there for several months thinking when was my turn to code blue, because I was not out of hot water yet. And I was getting better, and they did figure out how to treat the Guillain-Barré, but I almost died from the Guillain-Barré because it started affecting my heart, where my heart had pulse excursions, they call it, where my pulse was in the low 20s for 4 to 5 minutes at a time. Because again, the Guillain-Barré was affecting the muscles of my heart. And they flew a lady from Colombia, an expert, to come help out. And so they gave me a round of immunoglobulin G, and at that point in time, I could barely lift my arms off the bed. A couple more treatments, and I was starting to move around. And that was probably the biggest hurdle ever. And then come to find out I wasn't brain damaged at all. So the thing is that I'd survived several miraculous things. First and foremost, the first one that I completely skipped over is that in Denton, when I was dying, one of the drugs they had to give me to keep enough blood for me to survive was called a vasopressor. And basically what that does is it basically collapses every single vein in your body so that the blood is restricted to arteries only. And the nickname for that drug is they call it the life or limb drug. Because the thing is it shuts all the veins in your body, and so your extremities have a tendency to die at that point in time. But you lose your limbs, but they save your life. And so for those of you who don't know me, I have a hand that I can't open up all the way because I have a little piece of dead muscle tissue here, and this knot, I don't know if you can see it or not, but this knot right here basically keeps this finger from opening up all the way. So I can't actually open up this hand all the way, but my grip is fine. And my hands are always cold because those veins in those fingers haven't fully recovered, but I still have my hands. I should not have hands or even fingers. I've talked to several people, and the most miraculous people, and you'll have to pardon the camera from shaking because I don't have a very good camera mount. But most of the people that have had that drug, I've never seen anybody keep a hand. The only one person I know is she had all of her fingers lost at the first knuckle. And so she lost the majority of her fingers. And she's the most miraculous one. I got to keep my hands. I got to keep my hands. I lost my feet. So both of my feet and ankles are gone. But I got to keep my hands. And so there's the first miracle. The second miracle is I'm not brain damaged. The third miracle is I didn't die. I aspirated on the ventilator twice while I was in Denton. I mean, I tried to die several times. Not tried. We'll get there again later. Hey! No! Sorry. I have a small terrier whose greatest adversary is the post office man. So anyway, so April was my first amputation. You know, Guillain-Barré was supposed to kill me and it didn't. And here I am, they're bringing in, but even before my amputation, they're trying to sit me up in bed, and I have no muscle mass. My muscles have atrophied. Almost, that's all the muscle, that's all the weight loss. I've lost 100 and something pounds in muscle, 150 pounds total, but at least 100 pounds of that was muscle mass. And so I didn't have the strength to sit up, sit down, move at all, much less I was paralyzed. But even when they started to unparalyze me, I had no strength. I had no muscle mass to do anything. So they basically had to force me up and sit me up on the edge of the bed. And it was scary because I thought I was going to fall off the bed, because if I slipped, I had no way of catching myself. And I don't think anybody truly can imagine what it feels like to have no control. You know, we talk about control freaks and those people that try to control things. We're all a little bit of a control freak, because let me tell you something. If you absolutely had no control, you would lose your mind. It's scary. It is terrifying. You're having to rely on everybody else to do everything. They move you. And if you fall, knowing that I used to be a 350-pound, 6'6" guy. There's not a lot of people who can carry me around, and I have not been around nurses long enough to know that that's their job, and they are perfectly capable of manhandling you if they have to. Even some of the smallest Texan nurses I've seen. And let me tell you something, I am absolutely thankful for the nursing staff and support that I had at Baylor. I could not have had better nursing staff, and I'm still friends with quite a lot of them. But it's absolutely terrifying to have somebody set you up on the edge of the bed and you're terrified of falling because you really truly believe that nobody's going to be able to catch your fat ass and you're going to get hurt. And you have to trust. You have to trust other people to help you out. And let me tell you something, I'm a stubborn piece of shit. I have a hard time trusting anybody. Much less the experiences that I've had since then make that even worse now. So I went through ICU. It actually spent 137 days. From January the 14th to 137 days later, I was in ICU. Now, that could be plus or minus. I don't remember. It was a long time. And at one point in time, they tried to put me on general floor, and I didn't make it. They tried to put me on general floor with a ventilator because I still, at the time, my lungs were weak, and I still needed a CPAP during the night because I needed the positive pressure because my oxygen levels would drop down to the 70s at night while I slept. And unfortunately, I got a tech, and because of all the trauma that I'd been through, I had a tech that basically tried to flip me over, and I told him not to. And basically, I had a vasovagal situation, and I basically passed out. And they go, "You can't be on general floor. You've got to go back to ICU." So not only did my special bed, my big fat ass bed, didn't barely fit in general floor, I had this big celebratory moment where I went to general floor and everything was great and the world was better and there was light at the end of the tunnel too. I went back to ICU and it completely devastated me, and I thought I was never going to get out of ICU again. And it was a really, really hard day. Not to mention that several times while I was in ICU, I had those vagal basal syndromes a lot during the time that I was in ICU. And every time I had to go somewhere outside of my room for a surgery, for a test, for something, I had a tech that would breathe for me because I was on a ventilator. And if you ever want to know something scary, try not being able to breathe on your own. Because basically you leave the room and they get this little tech guy with the blue bag, and he takes your trach off and he puts the blue bag on there and hooks it up, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna breathe for you and everything's gonna be cool." And you get your elevator. Remember, you got this really big bed. He's like, "All right, I'm gonna give you a really big breath and you're gonna hold it for about 20 seconds. I'll be right in there." Man, let me tell you something. That 20 seconds seems like it's like minutes. I mean, you can't do anything about it. You can't move on your own. You can't breathe on your own. You're just sitting there frantically looking around like, "Oh, where the fuck is he?" And I will try my best not to cuss on this show. Or this whatever this is going to end up being. But these are just the most traumatic moments I remember. I remember waking up during my dual metatarsal surgery, which is where they cut my feet in half, because I've been amputated twice, not just right foot, left foot, but I've had my right foot and left foot cut off at the middle. And then in September of that year, I had a redo where they cut my ankles off. And so I've had 2 bilateral amputations in that year. Not to mention that I laid in bed on my butt for so long because you could not turn me because of those vasovagal syndromes, that I had a huge sore on my butt that was so festered and so bad that you could actually see my tailbone. It was actually kind of exposed. And so I had to have a special bed that they basically blow air through sand. And there's one called a dolphin bed, and there's another one called an ocean bed. And one is one and one is the other. And let me tell you something, they're really comfortable when they work. But when you have to get unhooked for dialysis and they unplug that bed from the wall, you're basically on concrete and it hurts real bad. I just all these memories in the hospital, and I'm there's a lot more. Once I got out of ICU, I got transferred to, because I still couldn't go to general floor, I got transferred to an acute care facility in Plano called Life Care, and I met more great people there. One of the great people I met there was actually a nurse that died last year of cancer. That was really great fun with her. And so I think that's one of the hard things about being in these traumatic situations and being in the health position that I'm in, is that I meet like people who are also struggling health wise, and you become friends with them, and you see them die off. I remember one of the scariest statistics I saw when I was in rehab for 3 months in August 29th through November the 23rd is that the average life expectancy of a bilateral amputee is 5 years. And let me tell you something, when that 5 years came around, it was like a cloud over my head all the time. The thing is that I have a complete different perspective than a lot of other people have because of all the things that I've been through. The people that I've met, I've seen people who still have egos that go through rehab, which I was there for 3 months, and whine to everybody that they were in ICU for 60 days and try to compare with other people because either they want people to feel sorry for them or they want people to know how tough they are, or they need some kind of acceptance, or they need some kind of I'm better than you are. It's insecurity is what it is. And I used to have a lot of it. I used to be the most insecure person ever before all this happened. I was so insecure I was an asshole to a lot of people. And the thing is that my perspective has completely changed because I understand what is most important in this life. We get caught up on the day-to-day bullshit all the time. And we forget about the most important things in life are the people we surround ourselves with. And the thing is that if somebody feels one thing or another about you, then that's the way they're going to feel. And if you disagree with that, then hang out with somebody else. It's kind of the same thing about the people that told me that I needed to do this in 10 or 20 minutes or whatever. The thing is that you can't go through all this stuff and then try to put it in little bitty bite-sized pieces to make it easier for everybody else. None of this shit was easy for me. I didn't get that choice. Nobody put all of my trauma into bite-sized pieces so that I can easily digest that shit. I just sit there every single day and wonder whether that was my last day or not. There are people that wonder why I get upset when people try to help me out and don't ask me first, or they ask me and they continue to help me out even though I tell them I don't want their help. And they wonder why I get mad at them. Because I had to sit there and fight tooth and nail for almost a year to get my independence back. You didn't have to fight for that. You gradually had that as an adult. If you don't know what it's like to lose every single bit of your independence and your mom at 35 years old having to wipe your ass again like you're a baby, then you have no idea what it's like. And I have a lot of anger issues still. I have a lot of hurt, I have a lot of pain, I have a lot of trauma, I have a lot of things that I have to talk to counselors and everything else to get through. But I tell you one thing, I tell you, I'm a much better man now than I ever have been. And to be able to to relate to people who have similar traumas or similar traumatic experiences. Maybe not similar traumas, but just the experience of having to go through some life-changing trauma. And being able to sit with them and go, yeah, absolutely. To know exactly what they're going through. And I think that's really what I try to do. I really hope somebody out there, whoever's watching this, can look at this and go, man, it sure does feel good to have somebody that knows exactly what it's like to have to struggle and other people not have a clue about why you're upset because you don't want help, or because, to them it's no big deal, but to you it is a big deal. The rest of the story is that I went through rehab, had a lot of other traumatic experiences. I had very granular things, but again, the majority of them was amputations, having to fight for my independence again, and it being a gradual I learned to hate the word process, and I still kind of hate it. I still kind of loathe it a little bit. I hate the word process. We live in a society where everything is push up a button, get it now. I'm going to order it on Amazon Prime. I can actually get it later today because I want it and I want it now. And here it is 9 years later, and I'm still having to learn how to walk. I'm still struggling with walking because it's a process. I got to come home for a little bit in like July, but I was still in a hospital bed because I was kind of going a little stark raving mad because I'd been in a hospital bed for 7 months straight. And so my mom and my dad sacrificed everything. My mom and my dad sacrificed everything they had. Hey, Lon, just UPS. Sacrificed everything they had so that I could come and live with them, which is what every 35-year-old wants to do, is go live with their parents again. And at least have some semblance of not being in a hospital, not being around a bunch of dying people, having a room that had a window that I could actually see out of. And in late July, it was super hot, and I got enough strength finally to be able to transfer with help into a wheelchair. And my parents took me out, and I hit the heat, and I had one of those vasovagal syndromes again, and I passed out. And when I came to, I was back in the bedroom, and my mom was on the phone with 911, and they were bringing an ambulance out because my mom thought I had a stroke. And I did not want to go back to the hospital. I had no choice, but I couldn't fight for myself, and I couldn't stand my ground. I got basically lifted by a bunch of heavy men and from the Anna Fire Department into an ambulance, and they bussed me to McKinney, Baylor, even though I did not want to go to the hospital. That is the last place I ever wanted to go. And I tried to convince everybody that I was fine. And let me tell you something. I spent a year plus the years afterwards, understanding what it's like to take 5 or 6 steps forward and being thrown 7 to 10 steps back. Making a huge leap of progress and then all of a sudden going backwards. Going to general floor and then being put back in ICU. Getting taken off a ventilator and then being put right back on it. Getting to finally go home for not even a month and going right back to the hospital. Getting your feet amputated, telling that was the fix, only to have to do an amputation again because that fix didn't work. I could keep going. But I'll tell you this. Being back in the hospital was actually a blessing in disguise. Because the thing is that we tried to go from the LTAC, the long-term acute care facility, to rehab, directly to rehab. But they wouldn't let me in because all my records showed that I was too weak to be able to go into rehab. And so a month home and me doing all my physical therapy and fighting every tooth and nail to be better. And there was a liaison for Baylor rehabilitation at McKinney. And she looked at me and she goes, "Why aren't you in rehab?" And I go, "They won't let me in." She goes, "Well, we're going to fix that." And so I got to go home for like a week and a half. And during that time, I had a video call with the director for Baylor Rehabilitation Institute. Her name is Dr. Amy Wilson. And I looked at Dr. Amy Wilson and I said, "What does the monkey need to do? Because I need to go into rehab. Because I want to walk again. And I can dress myself and I can transfer with some help." And she goes, "That's good enough. I've seen enough. I'll find you a bed." And it took them about 4 or 5 more days and I got a bed. And I've spent the next 3 months in rehabilitation. August the 29th for 3 months. And so, like I said, the November the 23rd or whatever that day before Thanksgiving, I finally got to go home. And I got to actually be in a real bed, not in a hospital bed. I still had a full dialysis machine at home. I didn't get off of dialysis until June 15th, 2017. June 7th. June 7th, 2015. Sorry. But I'm back on dialysis, which is another 5 steps forward, 7 steps, 10 steps back. I had a lot of anger issues when I got to go back home. I lost everything. I lost my ability to walk. I lost my house that I had. I lost my retirement. Most of my money went towards medical bills. I had to buy a car because my 1987 El Camino 454 project car wasn't going to handle it. I had to sell my El Camino, which is my pride and joy that I worked on forever. I felt like I lost it all. And it was unfair. And I was mad. And because of that, I took it out on my parents because they were the closest people to me. I was extremely sensitive, and anything they said that I took personally, I did not react well to. And I regret it. But at the time, I was doing the best that I could. I was. So my parents, me, and my parents, and my family, we don't have a great relationship. That's my phone going off. I apologize. And so the thing is that I struggle every day. And I went through a lot of anger issues because of that. And I have some of my tattoos because I would not be here and be alive had it not been for friends. Because let me tell you something. I really felt like my parents abandoned me. It took me a long time to try to grasp at something until I realized that some things you just can't understand. They're not made for you to understand. You got to deal with what you got and do the best you can that you have the control to do. And that's it. It's all the power you've got. You can't change anybody else, and you can barely change yourself. The only person you have control over is yourself. And so this is my story. I have a horrible relationship with my parents, and I'm hopefully one of these days that'll improve. I don't blame my parents. I think they think I do. I'm still super sensitive to some of the things they say. And I wish there was an opportunity for them to hear me out. But I also know that that is an unrealistic expectation. So, this is my story. And the thing is that I hope to put this out there because somebody out there has dealt with some of this. I have LGBT friends that have horrible relationships with their parents. And they, just like me, felt like, how bad of a kid do you have to be for your own parents to abandon you? I know what that feels like. I was incommunicado with my family for years. And I still kind of am halfway incommunicado. I know what it's like to lose every single bit of your health and have to fight for it back. But let me tell you something. For those who are listening, there are people out there that have no idea what it's like to be able to fight for it back. And so for those of you out there, I hope you know that there are people like me who will sit there with you in that shit and feel it with you. We're rare. But let me tell you something. If there's anything I've learned, is being able to sit with a peer and experience and sit in the shit and just go, yeah, this sucks. It's kind of healing. And also, helping somebody else struggle should not be for the benefit of helping that person. I hope everybody understands that in my experience, every time I help somebody, I also help myself because I realized that the person I was trying to help, the advice, the information that I was giving them was exactly the advice and the information that I needed to help myself. And it was a very eye-opening awakening for me to have to hear what I was saying and understand that I needed to hear exactly what I was trying to tell them. So, I'm hoping to start something. I'm hoping to start a podcast. I'm hoping to talk about some deep issues And these podcasts, these videos are going to be long. So buckle up. It's going to be boring, but it's going to be real. So, and again, I apologize for my setup, but this is all I got. And this is going to be good enough because you know what? The subject matter is tough shit, and I got it. Y'all have a good day.